Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 11th episode of Serani Sembang here on the internet, going all around the world. And this is the 11th episode, and I decided to kind of like theme it on the idea of how there are all these culture wars going around all over the world. And I've got a guest here who joins me, and I'm really very happy and honored to have her all the way from Paris in, not Paris, in Limoges in France. Please welcome everybody, acclaimed author, Preeta Samarasan. Hi, Preeta, how are you?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's lovely for you. It's lovely to be here, and I'm good.
Okay, what time is it over there right now? It's 6 p.m. here.
It's noon.
Oh, okay,
it's noon. Here.
So it's about lunchtime. Okay, you're lagging a little bit, but I'm sure we can get through this because the sound is coming through loud and clear, so that's good. Okay. I want to basically give an insight into what's going on here to the people who are watching. At the moment, we've got a couple of people watching us through Facebook. I don't know how many on YouTube, but we've got some people here, about 4 or 5 people, and more will come in, I'm sure. Okay, so everybody, this is Serani Sembang, where we explore being Serani, identity and heritage. And we have Preeta Samarasan here, acclaimed author, Malaysian author, who now lives in France, in Limoges. That's central France, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's in the middle. It's just a little bit west of the middle of France. And yes, I don't actually live exactly in the city. I live 40 minutes outside it, but Limoges is the closest city to where I am.
Okay. Yeah. And the reason why I'm having Preeta on is that actually she's the mother of what I would claim as Serani kids, because your husband is of, you could say, European Western ancestry, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my husband's American. He is of, well, mainly English, Scottish, Irish ancestry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And your extraction is Tamil?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's mother right. And father Tamil, right? Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add to the stream a little PowerPoint presentation to introduce you to our viewers, so they'll get a better insight about perhaps maybe your background and a little bit of a lead-in to what we're going to talk about. Okay. So Preeta, you actually were born in Ipoh. Is that correct?
I was actually born in Batu Gajah, but my parents were already living, my parents and my siblings, my 2 brothers, were living in Ipoh at the time, but I was born in Batu Gajah at the Batu Gajah Hospital, yeah.
Okay, and then you grew up in Ipoh?
I grew up in Ipoh, that's right, yeah.
Okay, and you are an acclaimed author, social commentator, activist, now currently living in Limoges in France. I want to actually let the people know who are listening, bookworms might have heard of you. I heard of you from way back when I was doing some readings at Sekian. That was when we first met. This would have been maybe 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago.
More than 10 years ago, yeah. Let me think. It would have been, if I can place it, I think 2007. It would have been in 2007, yeah.
Wow, 13 years ago. Yeah. Okay, and that was about the time the book came out.
It was a year before my book came out, so it was...
A year before the book came out, okay. Okay, and it was at Sekian's place?
Yes.
Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct,
yeah. It was a literary reading session, and it was the first time I ever read stuff that I had written, which was also the last time.
Oh, no, that's too bad. I still remember... I still remember the poem you read. I was quite struck by it. Yeah, there was some wordplay, and I was quite impressed. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember you telling me that you enjoyed it, and I was just like awestruck that somebody of your caliber, said that you liked it. Yeah, and this is the book that came out 1 year later after we met. Evening is the whole day. Okay, vibrant, descriptive, and engrossing. Samarasan beautifully captures the conflict both within a family and a country. Now, I think that perspective, or rather the imagination that you had to bring this to the fore, to bring this story to the fore, right, is something that, in a sense, drives me. Okay, because as a mixed race person in this milieu, which is multicultural, I am always negotiating with what I am, how I am perceived, how should I behave, what are the expectations and stuff like that. And I presume that when you wrote this book, you had to jump into the heads of all these different people, because I believe it's told from the point of, is that correct? It's told from, or you've got many different characters.
Yeah, there are many different characters. I would say it's told from the point of view, it's an omniscient narrator. So, sort of the old-fashioned, like the narrator who knows everything about everybody. It's not told exactly from the point of view of any one character. Yeah.
Yeah, but apparently okay, I confess I haven't read the book, and I should.
That's okay.
Right?
No.
But I love reading the reviews because people say it grips them in terms of it was about this family that's kind of like dysfunctional. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they're struggling to come to terms with each other's relationships and stuff like that. That's
right. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously it's kind of like metaphorical of, you could say, our country, all the different characters trying to deal with each other. Yeah. Correct?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this particular text, which is from your website, sweeping in scope, sumptuously lyrical, and masterfully constructed, Evening is the Whole Day offers an unflinching look at relationships between parents and children, brothers and sisters, the wealthy and the poor, a country and its citizens, and the ways in which each sometimes fails the other. Now, I read this yesterday. I'm sure I read it a long time ago when the book first came out, but this time around, after, I guess, having grown up and having experienced stuff that has gone on in recent times, I'm looking at it and thinking, good God, I need to get into that book and, try and dive into what you saw and how you felt about what you saw. Because as a community, the Serani community at the moment is also trying to deal with a lot of conundrums. Okay. And I think you saw some of it, because several days ago, you sent me a private message because of something I posted. And you offered, I guess you tried to say that you understood where I was coming from. And I really appreciated that. Do you want to share this with our viewers?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the correspondence that we had was about the issue that's come up around the renaming of certain places in Malaysia, specifically in Penang, Georgetown. They want to name Georgetown, and St. Paul's Hill was the one that was mentioned in that article. And the article that had been posted was saying that there was Eurasian anger around the renaming. That was the specific headline, that there was Eurasian anger around the renaming of or the call to rename. I don't know whether it will actually happen, but the call to rename St. Paul's Hill. And you had expressed some reservations about that headline because you felt it was clickbaity, sensationalist. And I thought, I agreed with you that it was an unfortunate way of phrasing it, and that it would be, well, I had mentioned to you that when I saw that posted, in the several places I saw it, I saw, one particular comment thread where the immediate response was, well, who cares? Somebody said, who cares about the Eurasians? And I was taken aback by that because, as I mentioned to you, one of my best friends growing up, my best friend growing up in school in Ipoh was Eurasian. I've spent time with her family. And it never, growing up, obviously, it would never have occurred to me to think of them as less Malaysian. They were obviously as Malaysian as anybody else, but I didn't even think it would need to be pointed out. But somebody, of course, on that thread, somebody did immediately come and say, well, we do care about the Eurasians because they're Malaysian. But it struck me that even needed to be articulated. And yeah, I mean, I think it's an important conversation to have, how this issue, I had thought, okay, my position, I'm anti-colonial, as you probably know, and generally in favor of, renaming places if that's what people, want, if it feels empowering to do that, why not? But then it made me think more about how for Eurasians, this might be a complicated issue because of their mixed identity, and always having to negotiate, like, what is their relationship with those colonizers, and how do we make peace with this identity that has brought together colonizer and colonized, and how then do we face or think about the renaming of these places? Do we see it as for you to be anti-colonial, what does that mean? And how do we see this as both maybe an empowering gesture more than a loss of identity? Is it possible? Yeah, I mean, I think it's more complicated than I had realized, I suppose, for the Eurasian community.
And this is why I'm so glad to have you on the show, okay? Because, because number one, you responded to my post. And on the one hand, you said, I can see where you're coming from. And then on the other hand, you kind of like gave me the impression that, yeah, it's okay to be angry, but how can we manage this anger in a way that, we can move forward with it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I thought, that's how we should deal with it. Yes, I am Eurasian. I'm Serani. Yes, I have roots to the colonizers who came, from 500 years ago. Okay. Mm-hmm. And how do I feel about it? Yes, I did respond that I felt Eurasian anger was clickbaity. Okay. Mm-hmm. And yes, someone like you told me that perhaps the anger is natural. You and several others actually messaged me and said, actually the anger is about rights, but we need to manage the anger. And so I thought maybe us talking about it will be able to help us, in a sense, try to reframe the whole kerfuffle, for lack of a better word, Okay, you have an Indian heritage, right? Mm-hmm. And you went to America to do your studies, right?
That's right.
And and then your book project was about an Indian family, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
That's right.
Malaysia. Yeah. And consequent from that, you have put your own community, I guess, under a lens, under a microscope. Mm-hmm. And that has informed, I guess, your activism.
Mm-hmm.
Could you say that?
Yeah.
Because you have spoken out when you've seen racist situations that victimize Indian Malaysians, right? I also know that you would speak up, if any other race, was victimized. I think have seen that before, so you are an anti-racist true and true. Okay. So how do you think do we deal with this particular situation where there is a group that feels bringing the old name back, is the right thing to do? There is a group that came from the new name who feels that if you do that, you will actually erase our history, right? Mm-hmm. So what's the middle point? How do we manage this?
Yeah, I suppose I don't always feel that there is a middle point necessarily, but one thing that I think is very useful, can be a very useful exercise, is to sort of think what is under these demands, what is under these requests or demands, however we wish to phrase it. And so I don't want to, derail or make this about a different issue than you're asking about. But for example, in the recent conversation around what some people are calling cultural appropriation, and it's been such a big conversation in Malaysia. What I think many people react immediately to this idea that, oh, how can anyone tell us that we can't wear whatever we like? But if we step back and think about what people are saying when they express their reservations about it, what I'm hearing from most people, and I can't say that I've read every single thing that's been written, but what I'm hearing from most people who have this sort of reservation about it is not don't wear our clothes. It's we don't feel that we've been included in the national conversation. We don't feel that we have been accepted as equals and included, and therefore for you to take something that is ours and use our things when you don't include us, that's what feels bad. It's not using the things itself. So I'm using this just right now, just as an example. So going back to the issue of renaming places, I think it would be so useful for both sides to step back and ask, what is it that we're really feeling? Why is this making us feel bad? And once we can talk about that, if I can say it and you can hear me, then if there is no middle point, we can at least, I think, move forward with the conversation and find some kind of way to address it. If not, it might not be the question of what to name the place, whether we stick with the old name or bring a new name. It may not. The resolution may not have anything to do with that. The resolution may have to be a deeper level resolution, where maybe there's something the Serani community is feeling, a need that they have that's not being met right now. And maybe if we could meet those needs, this, I don't want to say superficial, but this, surface level concern would be less of a concern if we could meet that deeper level need. And I'm going to say the same thing for people on the other side who want to rename the place. It's equal. It's equal on both sides. What is it? What is the need that is not being met, that they're expressing in terms of, can we name this? Can we give this new name to this place? New, old, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But we want to change the name of this place. What is the need underneath that? Why is this important to us? And I think if both sides could sort of put aside the naming issue and talk about that, what are our needs that as a, we share this space. We're trying to sort of be different communities, but we're also trying to make up a larger Malaysian community. And somehow there are needs on both sides that are not being met. And if somehow we could name those, identify them, and hear each other when we're speaking, then it doesn't even necessarily need to be about a middle point on this one naming issue anymore. It would resolve so many things. It would, I think ultimately just having the conversation is my major recommendation.
To sit down and figure out beyond the superficial or what is so apparent, which is like if you name it this, then my history isn't included. If you name it that, then my history isn't included. So if it's just going to be about that, then larger issues beyond just what is so superficial will never ever be solved, I guess. And it'll always be a solve point. I want to ring. Sorry. No, I just wanted to reiterate who you are and why you're with us and stuff like that, because we've got lots of more people coming in. I've got with me guesting on this show Preeta Samarasan. She's an acclaimed author, and it's really good to have her here because she, in fact, has done a lot of work in bringing together the idea of like the race issues in Malaysia. And here is this project that you did for the Mekong Review, an article called The Race Ladder. And would you like to just give us an insight into what it is? For people who want to read it in detail, I've actually created a URL there. So all you need to do is remember bit.ly, and it's Preeta-Race Ladder, and you'll get to it. Or you can look for Mekong Review and go there. Would you like to tell us about this and what made it all happen?
Sure, yeah. Thanks so much for doing that, by the way. That's really useful to have that little URL. I'm going to remember it too. I mean, this essay came out of ideas that I've been thinking about for so many years because especially as social media began to take off and we began to have more and more conversations on social media that I feel a little bit harder to have in real life. But, we were having some of these deeper conversations, and I realized that we kept circling around some of the same issues, and some of the underlying principles were never getting heard. And of course, I read a lot about race in other contexts, and I have read, the famous essay on white privilege by Peggy McIntosh. And I thought, how do we apply these ideas to the Malaysian context? Because I found myself saying over and over again some of the same things, like, when you're in a position of privilege, how, you sort of have to be ready to do a little bit more listening, be ready to make space, what that can feel like, what that means, because we use make space very broadly, but what is that in concrete terms? And I thought, gradually as time went on, and I would say I'd been thinking about this for maybe a couple of years, and sort of thinking, with each conversation I would have, thinking, there it is again, there's the same thing again that came up. Things like just the very basic idea, for example, that racial privilege, it doesn't have to do, it really is, unfortunately, it really is about what you look like. And what people see as soon as you walk into a room, it really makes a difference. And we can, it feels so wrong to us, if you're progressive or liberal, or, it feels so wrong to have to admit that. But we have to admit it, because if we don't admit it, we can never really get past it. We can never really make those, what's the word I'm looking for? Make those adjustments or react with empathy.
Check ourselves, Yeah. I remember like a couple of months ago, I had discovered Robin DiAngelo and her white privilege, and I decided to actually acknowledge the privileges that I enjoy. Okay, and you followed suit. You were one of the first people who followed suit. I think you were one of several, not very many, followed suit, where we actually, in a sense, acknowledged the privileges that we had, okay? And I started off by saying that I guess my main privilege is my fluency in English language, It's not the color of my skin, right? I know that. Because I'm dark skinned, I'm tanned. It only becomes apparent, my language skills in, of course, an English language environment. And therefore, I fit in and I can take advantage of opportunities, whereas somebody without my language skills may not be able to do that, right? What other kinds of privileges do you think exist within the Malaysian kind of situation? You talked about color of the skin. Would you like to elaborate on that? Oops. No sounds coming from you.
At all?
Now there is. Okay. Try.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay. We talk about racial privilege in Malaysia, and I think it's closely linked, but not entirely identical with, basically the issue of colorism. Because once we get into the question of, I have that race ladder set up, and I said, there are some communities I don't quite know where to place on the ladder. And the ladder that I've set up is also very specific to Peninsular Malaysia, because I can't get into, I have not enough experience of East Malaysia to speak for East Malaysia. So I very openly say, I've sort of left them out of this conversation. And I really hope that someone else will do that. But within the context of Peninsular Malaysia, we have the Indian community. Once we get to the Indian community, though, that's where I think the color of your skin really does play a role, because again, this is a very difficult conversation to have, but among Indians, and we've seen some of these issues come up very much in the last week or so around the question of cultural appropriation, within the Indian community, we recognize that there are certain markers that quickly identify you as, I'm going to, for want of a better, we use this term like that type of Indian, that type of Indian. And it has to do with class and caste. It very much has to do with the color of your skin. And I think one of the reasons people, Malaysian Indians, reacted with discomfort to this photo shoot that was inspired by Bollywood is because we're used to seeing North Indian cultures erase South Indian cultures in Malaysia, even though the South Indian presence, demographically speaking, is larger. And it's such a complicated issue to negotiate because it is demographically larger. And so I wouldn't want to overlook or erase the presence of, Punjabis, Gujaratis. Of course, there are also Malaysian Indians who come from those communities. But we're so used to this value judgment of North Indian cultures somehow superior, more refined, it's a more beautiful culture. And we can't deny that the issue of fair skin plays into this. And this is why North Indian cinema, the actors and actresses have been kind of idolized. And when we saw that photo shoot, I think that was very much what we were reacting to, even though somehow it got lost in the conversation in the beginning. In the beginning, people were saying, you're taking our culture, you're using our culture. And it took, I think, a little while for people to point out, but that's not our culture. That's North Indian culture. Why are we offended by this? And then, again, here comes that, let's take a step back. Let's talk about what's really going on. Why are we offended by this? And underneath all is that feeling, that old familiar feeling of erasure and, oh, that's right. You don't like that type of Indian. You only like this type. And that's where I think the color of the skin comes important. I don't know. I mean, of course, being of Indian descent, I can't speak as much to how colorism plays a role in Malay and Chinese communities, but I know that it does from having conversations with my friends, from listening to what people say, about conversations within the Malay community or within the Chinese community. I know that it still plays a role. I mean, light skin is just valued over dark skin. So I hope that some of those conversations are happening, that people will be able to talk about it as well. But I can speak mostly of how it plays a huge role in the Indian community.
And you use the word erasure, which is a word that I'm kind of like, I've got my head wrapped around, and it's what drives me to continue with this use, or you could say even championing, of the Serani identity, because of the whole idea that for me, there was a community that existed before the British came, and that was the Serani community, and that was before English became our lingua franca, because my grandmothers spoke to their children in Malay, and I don't want us to forget that. And I want us to, in fact, own and celebrate the idea that perhaps our ancestral language was Malay, and therefore it does something else to our sense of having a homeland. If not the Serani person, where is their homeland? And so it's that idea of my grandmothers and what they were all about is being erased, is what actually, in a sense, drives me. Another one thing that I also want to talk about is that whole idea of like drawing lines in the sand, and I think Alfian talked about it, where when certain people point out differences, where exactly is that point of either power or disempowerment, So like when an Indian person cries foul, that a non-Indian person is using the, the cultural objects, what, should the person who is doing it try to listen, because that person comes from a position of more power. But is it because your privilege is being called out? And that's when you take offense, and that's when you start to get really rude in return, And both you and him, in your own ways, said that it was actually about empathy, about listening to what's really being said. And you also said this just now about like having a conversation, having chats about it, yeah. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that if you are not used to thinking about privilege and power, if you come from a place where you've literally, never been made aware of it, I think the first time that it's pointed out to you, it's very threatening. It somehow feels scary to have to acknowledge that you have this privilege. And I do come from a position of power, and this other person has less power, and therefore it's incumbent upon me to listen to them and to make space. I think once you get used to that idea, once you have had some practice with it, it becomes easier and easier. But for some reason, and I don't know what it is about human beings, but I see this globally, the first time that you have to acknowledge that you have privilege in a certain context, it feels very personally threatening. It somehow feels like an attack. And nobody wants to admit that they have privilege. So that's why, that is actually coming back to the essay. That is also one of the reasons I wanted to sort of set up this very clear visual way of talking about power, because there's always, in every society on earth, there is a balance of power, and there's no society that has a completely level playing field. And the playing field shifts, according to context, different places. Even within one country, the playing field is not always exactly the same. But I think the first step is to acknowledge that it's there, and wherever you can sort of practice doing this by yourself, even without making it a big issue or making it the subject of conversation everywhere you go. But when you step into a room, when you step into a social situation, you can kind of take this moment to think about what is the balance of power here. Even when two people having a conversation, anything, you can always stop and think about, okay, what is the balance of power here? In what ways do I have more power than this person? And maybe in what ways do they have more power than me? Because those things can coexist too. In some ways you might be powerful and in other ways not. But I think it's such a useful exercise to just get used to doing that and thinking like that. And maybe if we could all do that, then eventually those conversations will get easier and people will react less from that defensive.
And the anger will turn into perhaps maybe enlightenment more than anything else. Now this is your race ladder in the mainstream Chinese media. Okay, congratulations on this.
Thanks.
Seriously, congratulations.
Thank you.
That Chinese media picked it up and decided to do something here, because I have actually brought up the idea of privilege coming not from the dominant society, but a society that perhaps maybe like the Chinese society also has their levels of privilege. And when I mention it, I do get told off, and and it becomes quite difficult for me to try and explain that the privilege is, it does exist, and we need to acknowledge it. So it was nice to see this going up in Chinese mainstream media. Yep. Okay, moving right along. I want to kind of like come back once again to your identity, your sense of identity, and your sense of heritage. Okay. Family residence of the Velasamis. So this is your dad's family?
No, my mother's.
Your mother's. Okay.
Would be my great-grandfather's house that you're looking at there. Yeah.
Great-grandfather. So did he come from India? I mean, like the assumption.
Yes.
I'm making an assumption, and I apologize if that's rude. I'm not sure.
No, not at all. No, it's an accurate assumption. He came from South India, from Tamil Nadu, but we don't really know much about why he came. I think he didn't come as an indentured laborer. He came on his own with not very much money. I think he had something like some capital that he wanted to invest, or just a sense of adventure, I suppose. We don't really know all that much about why he came. Yeah.
But what do you know? I mean, so he came and he opened up a little business of his own?
He bought some land. He arrived in Malaya, and I believe he arrived in Gopeng or somewhere around there. And he bought some land, and he bought a few cows and sort of started.
Okay, and this is your mother's side. So and your dad was also in from that part of town?
My dad's family. So actually, in my dad's family, they came over one generation later. If I'm not mistaken, it was my grandparents who. Actually, am I saying this correctly? I think I'm not sure. I know that my paternal grandparents
Yeah.
had a connection to India.
Right.
They went back. They had relatives there that they were still in touch with. That my grandmother on my dad's side, her siblings were still there, and she would go back frequently.
Okay.
They still have that link to India, whereas on my mother's side, they didn't really. There was no link.
Have you ever been back to India to either of your, maternal or paternal ancestral side?
I've been to India twice. One of those times I was in South India, but I didn't make it to any of these villages, any of the specific sites, and I wouldn't actually know. I mean, someone must know how to trace at least my father's family because, I know that my grandparents even had that contact, but I unfortunately didn't. I did not make the effort to do it.
Okay. Well, it's never too late. Grandfather and his brother. So this is the grandfather who was born here, right?
This grandfather was born actually, he was born in Malaya. If I'm not mistaken, he was born in Nibong Tebal in 1899.
Right. Okay. Great picture, two brothers.
Yeah.
And this one goes a little bit backwards, right? So this is the extended family of your father's or mother's side?
Mother's side. So this picture, I was just talking about it actually on Instagram. This picture was taken in 1935, and I know I can date the picture exactly because of the baby that my grandmother is holding. That's my uncle, and I know that my uncle was born in 1935, and you can see in this picture that he's less than a year old. He was born in May, so I would assume this picture was taken, probably less than 6 months after his birth.
Right. Beautiful picture. Beautiful picture.
Yeah.
And and once again, this is in Gopeng. You still have family in your parents are in Ipoh or in Gopeng?
My parents are in Ipoh. So my parents are back in Ipoh, I should say, because they lived after I left Malaysia. My parents moved to KL, and they lived in KL for a long time until last year. And then we decided to move them back to Ipoh. So no, we don't have any more connection in Gopeng. Basically, after my great-grandfather died, all of his children had settled elsewhere. And so that house in Gopeng was sold. I last saw it maybe 20 years ago almost. It's now, it's still a shop house. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a restaurant of some kind on the ground floor, and upstairs, I don't know. But one thing that is still there in Gopeng too is my grandfather, once he became more wealthy, built a Hindu temple in Gopeng, and it was the first Hindu temple in Gopeng, and still there with his name on it and everything, that he gave the money for the building of the temple. Yeah.
Wow. What a sense of legacy and pride it must be for you when you go to the temple.
Have I even been there? I would say I've been there, but yeah, I think I've been there once a long time ago before it was renovated, and now it has been renovated. It's a much more beautiful and grand temple, and I've only seen pictures of that.
Okay, well, your next trip, and I'll go with you. This picture is, tell us about this picture. I didn't put in a caption. Sorry about that.
Yeah, this is my dad's family. So my mom and dad are the couple on the left, standing
on the left. Okay. This over here, the ones that's
my dad and my mother standing next to him, and then next to my dad is his brother and his brother's wife. And there were actually more siblings. There were more siblings, but they are not in this picture. I think they were off doing their studies when this picture was taken. My other uncles would have been in India doing their studies, or elsewhere. I can't be too sure. But anyway, my dad, and this is the brother who was just after my dad.
Yep.
And then seated is obviously my grandparents, and the little boy is my oldest brother.
Oh, okay. So that's your oldest brother. Okay, and this gentleman, your grandfather here, is the man who was photographed with his brother earlier on, right?
No, this is my other grandfather. This is my dad's father, who was. So my grandparents, three of them were civil servants. under the British. So their other grandfather worked for the British Postal Service all his life. And then these two grandparents, both of them worked, and they were both Tamil school teachers. And my grandfather retired as inspector of Tamil schools.
Okay, lovely. And great-grandpa who emigrated from Tamil Nadu. So that's
the one I was talking about, who came.
Right, the one who
a little bit of money.
bought that house. Yeah, right, okay. And this is you at one. What a cute little girl you were. Yeah, and these are your girls.
That's right, yeah.
The girls whom I will claim as Serani girls. Because they are, they weren't born in Southeast Asia, but they've got Southeast Asian and European. So so I will say they're Serani girls, if you don't mind. I'm going to claim them. I need to make up the numbers before I can take over the world.
No, I don't mind.
Look at them here. Oh, and their names are?
So their names are Rumika, the older one, and Junia Lee is the younger one. Or we call them at home, we call them Ru and Junie. It's easier.
Okay. So now I know where the R and J comes from when you're referring to them on your Facebook posts.
Yeah.
Put faces to the names. Another Deepavali. Okay. And this is the family. What does Rob do? What does your husband do?
He's a software engineer.
Okay, fantastic. The kind of work to be in. What with the pandemic and everything, you don't want to be in an airlines or the hotels. But
that's true.
Yeah, software and IT. That's where everybody should be moving to. And this is them eating appam balik. And this is back in Malaysia.
That's right. Yeah, this is in Ipoh too. Yeah, at my cousin's house a few years ago.
Okay. So they're very comfortable eating Indian food and Malaysian food and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, they are.
Okay. And is this your maternal or paternal grandma?
Maternal, yeah, it's my grandma.
Maternal. And was she born here in Malaysia or did she come from?
Yeah, she's the daughter of my great grandfather who set up in Gopeng. Yeah. So she was born in Gopeng.
Right. She would have lots of stories to share with you about the early Malaysia and stuff like that.
She did. She had loads of stories. She passed away in 1998. She had an extremely vivid memory. Her long-term memory never failed her. And she was full of stories. And I remember when she was a young bride, she had lived in Ipoh when they were first married. And I remember she lived in Greentown, which at the time was green. It was jungle. And I remember she had stories even about hanging up her washing in the morning. She'd be hanging up her laundry and there would be tigers. She saw tigers while hanging up her laundry. It's unthinkable. If you've ever seen Greentown in Ipoh now, it's full of malls. It's very urban now. Yeah.
And were you inspired by her storytelling to become a novelist, to become a writer?
It's a very good question. I think, I think that Indian people are kind of natural storytellers. We have a lot of storytellers in the family. We really love to talk and remember. And I think I sort of grew up around it. Nobody in my family was a writer, but I grew up around people who love to tell stories and who have a lot of attachment to family stories. And so, in that sense, I'm sure that it fed into my love of stories.
Right. Yeah. And so nobody else is a writer in your family. I mean, is that artists, creators?
Else, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I'm mostly talking about my immediate family. We have some other creative people for sure, but nobody writes fiction. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we probably have a few journalists or people doing other kinds of creative things. We have a couple of people who are artists, but I think I'm the only one who writes fiction so far. Maybe there will be others.
Okay. And here you are at 3 years of age with your dad.
Yeah.
What did dad do?
My dad was a teacher. Yeah. School teacher.
Okay. What did he teach?
He taught English and history in secondary school.
Right. So English and history. Okay. That's your grandmother again. This is the same grandmother, right? No? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Lovely. And your two girls again.
Eating. We're always eating in Malaysia.
Always eating. Yeah. And this is when you're back in KL. When was this? Not too long ago.
I think it might even have been last year, just before they moved, just before they left KL. Last few.
Okay. And were you intending to come back this year, and did the pandemic kind of like put an end to all those?
Yes, I normally come back every year, so this is the first year in a very long time that we have not been back.
Right. Yeah. When were you due?
Normally I come in the summer, either July or August, because kids are off school, and that's when we travel. Yeah.
Okay, and here they are wearing grandma's saris in France. Beautiful. And of course, your girls, being from a biracial family, have cousins who might be from one or the other, and in this case, it's Belgian cousins.
Yeah.
Right?
So these are actually my. So this is Rob's brother's kids with my girls, and so their dad is American, but their mother is French, but they live in Belgium. They just that's where.
Right. Having biracial kids, what kind of challenges do you think you face? What kind of fears, and how do you deal with having kids who are biracial?
That's huge. It's a huge topic. But challenge. I'll talk first about the fears, because it's been on my mind a little bit lately with this whole cultural appropriation question. And since I chose to send you pictures of my daughters in Indian clothing specifically, because one big but one big goal of mine, I want them to grow up aware of their privilege. I want them to know that in many ways they get a lot of attention for their looks. And anywhere in the world here, but also, and it's different in Malaysia, they get a lot of attention for being fair-skinned and having blue eyes, and when they wear Indian clothing, they get a lot of positive attention for that Indian children don't get. And I don't want them to feel guilty about that. I don't want them to feel like it's their fault and they shouldn't exist or anything like that. Nothing like that. But I just want them to be aware of it, and I want them to have that awareness of power that for other people comes later. Quite a lot. And I think it helps them to be aware. We even talk about the fact that when I'm alone, the reception that I get in Malaysia with people who don't know me is very different from the reception that I get when they're with me. It actually, unfortunately, raises my
sorry, we lost you there. We lost you there. I'd like for you to repeat it. It raises your... It
raises my status by a couple of notches when either their dad is with me or the kids are with me, because I walk in and immediately the first thing that a shop owner or a shop assistant will say is, "Your kids are, ma'am, are they mixed?" Right? I mean, immediately, that means that you have some connection to the West. You have, I mean, it's again uncomfortable to acknowledge, but there it is, and they have seen it. And when it happens, I always make sure that I talk to them about it afterwards. What was that about? Why is it important to that person? Why did that person need to know? And even though that person would not articulate it in that way to themselves, that person would never say, "I needed to know it because X, Y, Z," and yet they needed to know it. They asked. Why did they ask? And we have these conversations, and as my kids grow older, of course, when they were little, it was very simple. I would just sort of debrief with them to make sure, And now as they're getting older, because my older daughter is 11 now, she's at an age where she's thinking about these things a lot more, and so the conversations also have grown more complex. In terms of challenges, that's sort of the fears, and the challenges that I have, I guess it's very closely related to the fears, and the challenges being that, being a biracial family, anywhere we go in the world, we get a lot of attention, and sometimes that feels good, but other times it really does not feel good. Other times we don't want the attention, we just want to be sort of to recede into the background, and it's never possible to recede into the background. We always will get, questions or types of attention, especially my older daughter is quite introverted. She's a very introverted person. And I think for her temperament, it's sort of a struggle for her sometimes to always have to be the different one or to get this kind of attention, because on top of being biracial, they're also third culture kids. They're living in a country that is neither my country nor their dad's country. At home, we speak English. Out outside the house they speak French. There are a lot of things to negotiate, and so those are some of the challenges.
But it'll hold them in good stead. I think when we are exposed to those kinds of negotiations, right? When we kind of like reach out and embrace those challenges, I think it really makes us more resilient, rather than if we decided to just, stay underneath our coconut shell, and then we'll just be framing reality in a very limited fashion. Whereas if we are constantly being bombarded by challenges such as this, I mean, I'm saying this based on my own experiences of being this brown-skinned, very Asiatic foreign student in Australia. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when I'm there among my white friends or in a white environment, right, everybody thinks I don't speak English. And then when I speak and they realize I'm probably more fluent than them, I can feel how things change, and so I become very aware of that privilege and realized, that I did have an advantage, So it's quite interesting how human minds cope, with these kinds of things, right? So I just want to remind listeners, watchers, viewers, whoever out there, that I have here with me Preeta Samarasan. She is an acclaimed author of a book called Evening is the Whole Day. I'm going to bring up that book again because I want to pimp you. I want to pimp you, Preeta. I want to pimp you because I don't know. I just feel that based on like I said, I'm really sorry I haven't read the book yet, but I just like that whole idea of how you actually created an Indian family, and all the drama was going on, and some reviewers said that it really brought it was disturbing but so real, that they just had to read till the end. So this whole idea of like, I don't know whether it's correct to say a dysfunctional family trying to come to terms with their dysfunction. Is that what happens? They're trying to
family just, I suppose, trying to. I don't think they ever come to terms with it. The novel ends without them, and I think it's quite rare in real life too for a dysfunctional family to come to terms with their. And I think most dysfunctional families. Right? Yeah, they just sort of get on with it. And I think most dysfunctional families probably don't even realize that they're dysfunctional. They always think other people's families are dysfunctional, and they don't quite.
Actually, we're all dysfunctional.
Their own family, unless something really, really bad happens to disrupt the peace. Which it does in this story. So I think they do recognize that they're forced to see that there's some things that are wrong. But I don't think they ever resolve it. I don't think they come to terms with it in that sense.
Yeah, but I mean, like for us to watch it and see it and perhaps maybe identify with parts of it, is of course a learning experience. And that is why listening to stories and listening to conversations are really important, whether we agree or disagree with it.
Yeah.
About listening and, just opening our minds for a little bit to get a different point of view. Yeah, it's so important. Yeah. So I guess your advice to Serani people in this environment of East versus West, white versus non-white, colonialism versus decolonizing, all that. I guess your driving advice is just stop and listen and be aware of your own privileges.
Yes, and also always try to identify what's going on for you when you're uncomfortable with something. What is it? What is your attachment to the issue at hand? What's your stake in it? And really at a deeper level, why you care?
Why you care? Find out why you care. What's irking you? Yeah, what's upsetting you?
Yes.
Right? What are the triggers? I think it's really important to have that self-awareness.
Yeah.
That mindfulness, which is such a big buzzword, which most of us are still trying to get our minds around, so to speak, to pardon the pun. Yeah. is there anything that you would like to kind of like, say to us Serani people, Eurasians, with regards to, I don't know, Merdeka Day?
Oh gosh, Merdeka Day is such a tough one for me, because I have a very problematic relationship with the nation state.
Okay.
And I believe in communities. I believe in, identity. Like I know, some of the forces that bind Malaysians together because we've had this shared history and we have these shared memories. But in terms of the force of the nation state, sort of the institution, I have a very mixed feeling about it. And so all of these occasions become complicated for me, Merdeka Day, and all of the trappings as well of the nation state, the flag, I understand why these symbols exist, and I understand why some people find them useful or empowering, or some people have that attachment to them. It's not the case for me. I suppose with Merdeka Day, for me, rather than choose to, I think celebrate is such a complicated word when it comes to this occasion. And I feel the same. It's not just Malaysia. I'm going to say I feel this way about pretty much every country on earth. Like if we look at the Independence Day or their National Day, whatever they call it, it's always going to be mixed for me. Like here are some things that you could, some achievements that you can celebrate, but here are all these other things that are happening as well that are not reasons to celebrate. And so, for me, on those days, rather than thinking about celebration, I prefer to think of it as a time to reflect, to think about where you've come and where you wish you had been instead, how much is left to do. I suppose it's not, my advice is not going to be specific to the Serani community, but just to Malaysians and even people anywhere celebrating this kind of occasion. To think about what does the country mean to you, and what dreams, I suppose, do you have? And I suppose my tendency would be to set aside the nation state and to say, as a people, as a community that comes together, do we have a dream or an ambition, a goal for the future that we all share? And what is it? Maybe it's time to think about that.
Yeah, and perhaps what we can do in our own small ways to help make the country a better place to live in. Yeah, we've got this comment from Finn Augustine, who is actually in, I believe, Melbourne. He says, absolutely agree with Preeta. Children notice everything about the way the world responds to their parents. Biracial children would learn very early, whether they are aware or not, about the deep-seated casual racism in our world. How old are your daughters now?
11. The older one is 11. The younger one is about to turn 8.
Okay, and 8 and 11. And they are aware of casual racism because you've had conversations with them, and therefore they can pick it up. Yeah, and probably the conversations that you have with them would actually help, I guess, build their resiliency, and would be able to stand up to most things, I would imagine.
I hope so. Yeah, that's my goal anyway. We do. Yeah, I think whether or not, at least, whether or not they'll be more resilient because of the conversations, I can't say for sure, but I hope that at least they'll be more aware because of the conversations we have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for making time, right, and sharing with us your family.
Great. It's wonderful.
Thank you for all the stuff that you're doing with regards to, anti-racism and, the culture wars, trying to kind of like quell, the anger and the nonsense and the ridiculousness among all us Malaysians, struggling to be heard. Yeah, in this current times. Yeah. Thank you so much, Preeta.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, and
again.
Yeah, have a great weekend, and yeah, warmest regards to all the family. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and hope to see you again in person sometime soon.
Okay. Yes. Well, apparently RMCO is happens to, what's the word for it? Will only end on the 31st of December, so it would be. I'll probably see you in 2021. A bit far off, but never mind. Yeah. Okay. Well, see you then. Thank you, everyone who's listening. We had a lot of bye-bye. We had a lot of comments, which you will see on the Facebook page. Yep. Thanks, Preeta.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. See you all next week. Now, where is my Okay, here we go.
Hi Vernon, congratulations on 20 years of Serani Sembang. This is indeed a milestone, and this success is a reflection of your passion, dedication, creativity, and tenacity. Happy to call you my friend, and let me try in the mother tongue of my grandmother to wish you well. Eu reza Deus logo benzecubos todo dia. God bless and lots of love.